Welcome to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers, for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
Episode 18, an interview with Tyler Muto, part 1.
And so I read one of the best books I've read in the last 10 years was a book called The Talent Code. Are you familiar?
Oh, it's a great book. Yeah, great book.
And in there, they refer to exactly what you're talking about as your matrix of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And they talk about matrix, the schematics and the understandings and the neuroconnectors that you've created in your brain that to you is now an impulse or an instinct, right? The same way when we condition dogs, we're trying to condition them to just accept the behavior right away, right? And not having to think too much about it. And I think that's one of the big things is in balanced dog training, you actually have to work on those technical skills, like you're saying, till it becomes muscle memory, till it becomes in your body, till you know it in your body, right? Because I remember, we started. So me and Mariano started at a kennel. I was the training manager at a kennel when he started, and I can't explain how much daycare work really helped me with timing, body language, being on top of a situation, social pressure, body pressure, all that type of stuff that you use to control a herd of dogs. How much that helped me connect to certain leash training techniques or just the timing of how to interrupt a behavior when you need to, right? So everything eventually gets interconnected and you start seeing this huge web of information that only makes sense to you, right? And And so, but the beautiful part about teaching, what they refer to in that book, they call them master coaches. Master coaches are constantly trying to perfect their craft, but master coaches are able to, in the moment, just like you have this empathic connection with the dog or that student, and you say, right now, giving all the variables that I'm seeing playing out, I need you to do this. And they're able to take that direction right away. They see the result and then they go, oh, and then after the fact, you explain why you did that. Right. And so they have to take that bit of knowledge, put that into their matrix. Right. And it comes down to the more dogs you train, the bigger all those connectors start connecting to each other. And we start actually making sense of this information web in our brain, which is beautiful, right? It's that is what makes us professionals, right? The fact that we keep seeking that out.
Yeah.
You know what's funny too is we were just talking. Well, by we I mean my roommate and I. We both do jiu-jitsu and boxing and a couple other things, and we were just kind of laughing about this because, of course, with the whole everything being shut down, that goes for the gyms as well, and the jiu-jitsu gyms have slowly started opening back up, and so we've gone back to to training here and there on a limited basis. And we were talking about instructors. There are some that they're amazing in and of themselves. They're like high level black belts that are just competition tested and they're good. But sometimes they have a hard time explaining something. They'll be like, okay, grab this leg here, that leg there. And then they'll say something that doesn't really mean anything. It'll be like, boom, pow. And it's like, yeah, but what is boom type thing? So it is funny that being good at something is kind of a different skill than being good at teaching it to someone.
Yeah.
That's true. And that's the difference, I guess, between great educators and not great educators.
Yeah. And there are also people that are great coaches that aren't necessarily great at the thing they are coaching. You know what I mean? So not every all-star basketball coach is actually a great basketball player.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there are certain aspects of dog training that I am certainly not the best person to implement.
Right.
But I'm really good at telling you what needs to happen. I'm really good at telling you what to do. Although I may not be the best person to actually do it, and that goes with just about anything. Right.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think, especially in dog training, our communication with the animals is so important, but our communication to the humans is extremely important as well. And that's always something that I focused a lot on early in my career was, how do I articulate this in a way that is super clear? Mm-hmm. And sort of on a two-way basis, as well. One of the things that I see a lot when I'm coaching other dog trainers and they're working with clients, we see sometimes where the client asks a question and the trainer answers a question that wasn't asked, right? They answer a question that's different from the one that was asked because they weren't truly listening to what was said. Mm-hmm. And so being precise in both your speaking, but also in your listening,
right,
are extremely important things. For me, I think that sort of obsession with precise language is sort of deep rooted in me. I've spoken about this before. Some people don't know, but I grew up with actually a really terrible stutter. So when I was young in elementary school, middle school, high school, I didn't really grow out of it until sort of midway through college. I had a very bad stutter, which gave me terrible social anxiety, extreme fear of public speaking, like paralyzing fear of public speaking, to the point where I just wouldn't do it. I was ridiculed when I was young. And so when you have a stutter and like you can tell, or at least for me, because different people have different, their stutter may manifest differently. But for me, I could tell when I was going to get stuck on a word. And so I would have to come up with different ways to say things and make sure that I wasn't using, more words than what were necessary. Became like a really big thing, obviously.
Right.
And so I think on sort of a subconscious level, when I kind of grew out of my stutter, I'm one of the people that are fortunate enough that it didn't carry over into adulthood. Being able to speak freely was such a privilege and such a blessing.
Right.
That I took it really seriously. Being able to speak in public in front of a crowd was like, oh my God, like I can do this.
Right on.
It's something that was like just such a huge thing that, and I was always so envious of people that were really skilled public speakers. Like you guys mentioned that you're having Michael Ellis on pretty soon on your podcast. I don't know if that's a spoiler alert or anything like that.
No, you're good.
You're good.
But he's so articulate. He's such an incredible public speaker, and I really admire that. Anytime I see somebody that is just can just speak with such clarity and such precision in their thoughts and in their meaning, that just really stands out to me, and it's something that I admire a lot.
Yeah. Well, always it's like game respects game, and it's you're a great educator. You're a master educator yourself, and
I appreciate that.
That's really what it is I always tell people, I said, dog trainers should work really hard to make things make sense. They should work really hard. Right. Yeah. And one thing that you actually brought up that just struck in my mind, I remember being a younger dog trainer, right? Where you have a lot of like, knowledge in the sense of how things should be. You just don't necessarily know how to articulate it into those exact precise words. Right. And this tends to be a tell for a really, young or a really novice dog trainer is they talk a lot. They talk a lot, right? And they talk a lot in the sense of they're telling you ideas, ideals, goals, but they're not explaining to you how to get there, right? Yeah. And I see this a lot. So I think those of you guys who are listening who are dog trainers really work on breaking down what it is you're what are the component pieces, try and understand what this matrix is. And sometimes the only way that you actually figure out, oh, this was the missing stepping stone, or this was the missing piece to the explanation, is actually just training the dogs, right? I was fortunate enough to grow up in a facility for 10 years, right? Before I even started my own business. So we had training dogs, I can proudly say we've done probably like 3,000 dogs because I worked in a facility, right? I put my hands on over 3,000 dogs, and that's practice. And every dog is different, and you have to be so dynamic, and you have to, you just have to. And what I really love about what you do, and I can definitely say we have, kindred spirits in a way, because the empathy, the connection to that dog, the ability to read that body language is just so important. And some people have that skill naturally, and some people, they have to learn to develop it, Yeah.
I mean, I think that's an important, thing that you sort of hit on there. I've been asked before, when I'm hiring staff, like if I could only pick one quality when I'm hiring a trainer. And I always say the most important quality for me is empathy and compassion. If you don't have the ability to put yourself in the dog's position and then also in the client's position, then you're never going to make it in this field. You've got to have the ability to see the world through somebody else's eyes. Yeah. Or you're going to be sort of, forever limited, especially if you're doing behavior work. I mean, if you're just doing obedience, you'll get by. But if you really want to do behavior work and you want to do it well and you want to not get bit, then you really have to be able to understand, how is the dog experiencing this? And then once you understand that, a lot of times the answers become very clear to you. The other thing that I would add, you mentioned like, hey, if you're struggling with, kind of articulating or putting the thing into a process, write it down. You write down what you do. you guys, mentioned earlier, some of my courses that I produced with Learberg and stuff like that. And I can't even express how illuminating of an experience it was when I had to put those courses together for Learberg. And they've got a really great operation over there. And when I was getting ready to do my first course with them, they sent me this whole packet. I had to break things down. I had to have a whole outline for the course, and then I had to break things down like shot by shot, so that when I showed up to film, because we had only a few days, they're flying me in to film,
right,
that we knew exactly what shots we needed to get, what the scene needed to be, whether I needed a dog or not, what kind of dogs I needed, what other equipment I needed. We had to organize all that ahead of time. Now, you don't necessarily have to go that deep, but even creating like a rough outline of like, okay, I'm going to teach place command, or whatever it is you want to be doing. And then writing down the steps, and then like actually seeing if those steps make sense and the order of operations. And I can't tell you how many times when I'm like planning a video out that I'm shooting, that I get it all outlined and I go, wait a minute, I should do step 5 before step 3. I've been doing that. Wow, this should be. And then it's like, wow, I've been doing that wrong. And I didn't realize it until I put it on paper.
Right.
And then the other thing that I found really valuable when I was first starting out, when I was younger, I used to go to seminars, or I'd go and just, I'd go travel out just to train with somebody for a few days.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd call my wife every night. And my wife's not a dog trainer. I'd call her every night and I would explain to her what I learned.
Yep.
And if I couldn't explain it to her in a way that she could understand what I was talking about, then I haven't fully grasped.
Yeah, that's
what it is. You know what I mean?
That is definitely a technique that I used a lot. When I was a younger dog trainer, I had I was able to explain knowledge that I learned as if I knew it for years. And so having this ability to learn it and explain it, but I totally get you. If you couldn't explain it thoroughly where it made sense to somebody else, it's like I should either go back to it or watch it again. Actually, I'm pretty confident I did that with your leash reactivity video. I did that. I watched it about 3 times.
And sometimes just the process of explaining it and the process of articulating it is what brings those ideas together and what solidifies your understanding and makes those logical connections between things. And if you never take the time to articulate it back out in a clear and concise way, as opposed to like broken up over 8 sessions over 8 weeks or whatever you're doing with a client, then you might not ever get to that full picture. But teaching is one of the best ways to learn.
100%. Yep. And the funny sorry, I just want last thing. The funny thing is, sometimes when you're a young dog trainer, you want to teach them the way you would train the dog versus the way they need to learn to train the dog.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because there's a lot of, as you mentioned, there's a lot of not steps that are skipped, but there's a lot of windows and pockets that we see in training where we can say, okay, the window's open. I'm going to take that. And we just saved ourselves, a day and a half of work because we were able to see that window. Right. So yeah, sorry, go ahead, Mariano.
No, you're good. Well, that's the trick, right? That's when you get good enough at something, you learn how to kind of play with it. Because what I notice in anything that's as like dense and something that you'll never really master, like a martial art or a sport or something, I notice that like when you're not good, when you're brand new, you don't really know anything, so you're just kind of learning and you're really meticulous about what you do. Once you're still new, but you kind of have a game plan, so to speak, you just go for that game plan. And when things get off the rails, you try to find your way back to that game plan. Mm-hmm. When you get better, you play around with it. So it's like, okay, well, I'll work on this, kind of seeing what's going to happen, because I know that just based on the dog and the information at hand here, if something ends up not being what I wanted it to be, we can work backwards. It's all good. Or we can make lateral moves to kind of get us back to where we need to go. And I also wanted to touch on, just for our dog trainer friends who listen to this, it's definitely a good idea to just write stuff out, talk about it. Like, just me and Brent have been talking about this for like our past 3 or 4 episodes. It's crazy how, we did 5 episodes just deep diving into certain types of training methods and things. And we do that. And then like the next day you luck out and somebody asks you like, hey, so, a question regarding e-collar. And it's like, I just spent like 90 minutes talking about that last night. So let me tell you. And like, it does help you kind of sharpen your explanations, and it does make you quicker. So a little game that I like to play is for a newer dog trainer, take a topic, something that you understand or would like to understand better, or at least would like to be able to explain better outwardly. Maybe you understand it, but you can't make others get it. Write it out and be detailed with it, and then try to make it shorter and shorter and shorter and still make sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's awesome.